So this lecture is going to be about thank you letters, and I'm just combining some pre-recorded audio that I did with the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to get that set up for you, and that's what you're going to be hearing once this cooperates. Game on! When we talk about thank you letters, you want to make sure that you absolutely always send a thank you letter. You're going to need a thank you letter whether you intend to take the job or whether you don't want to take the job. Because a lot of the times, a thank you letter is what is really going to set you apart from someone else who the employers are looking at to hire. So for example, if you and another classmate basically have the same qualifications and you have all of the same experience and you both look really awesome on paper, you did a great interview, when I'm going to hire you, I'm purposely going to wait a little bit just to see who's going to send me a thank you letter and who's going to show me that initiative. When you send a thank you letter, it says a lot about you, which you want to show to these employers. So, let's go through how to write one of these. If you're looking at the PowerPoint, we're going to start on the first actual slide, not the cover page. So it would be the second slide of the PowerPoint, but the first slide with actual information on it. So, like we were saying, whether you want the job or not, you absolutely need to send a thank you letter. Thank you letters are going to show initiative. They're going to show that you care. Thank you letters are also going to show... Thank you letters are also going to be your last attempt to get your name across that person's desk. And trust me, a thank you goes a very, very, very long way. Think about already the things that you might have done for your patients or things that you do for people in general, and you've never gotten a thank you for it. And when someone does thank you, they're the patient, they're the person that you remember. Teaching. You don't get a lot of thank yous, and you remember the people who say thank you. So that's another reason why you're going to send one of these letters. You want to make sure that you send a thank you letter within 3 days from your actual interview. So sometimes you can have the framework of this thank you letter already written before you go to the interview, and then you can fill in kind of that middle paragraph. And then send it out rather quickly. 3 days is a staple because if you're going to send it in regular, quote-unquote, snail mail, you mail it within 3 days, it takes 2 days to get there. You don't want them to receive your letter more than a week after your actual interview because by that time they might have already hired someone else. It's too late. They might forget you within a week. So you want to get that thank you letter to them as quickly as possible because the faster you get it there, the more initiative it's also going to show. It is much more professional to mail these thank you letters than it is to send an email. When you send it through the regular mail, you actually have to do more steps. So you actually have to, address an envelope, type something out. You have to get a stamp. Like, there's more that goes to it. So actually sending it through the mail shows more steps, so it shows more care than if you just sent an email, which sounds a little weird. The other reason why sending it through the mail is better is because there are actually certain ways to format a professional email that a lot of people don't necessarily know. So instead of accidentally doing it wrong, you might as well just do it on paper and send it in an envelope. You can also drop the thank you letter off if you choose. Again, you would print it out, you'd fold it up, you'd put it in an envelope, and you would put the recipient's name on the front of the envelope, and you would seal it. So this way, when you drop it off to maybe the office secretary or whomever, they can't read what you've written, and it would go on their desk. If you don't want a job, which can happen, you might get there and the place doesn't look clean, they don't speak ethically, you just didn't like it. A thank you letter is also a way to turn the job down, which can be really appreciated by the people who are doing the hiring. Because if I'm doing the hiring and I have 8 candidates in front of me and I can't decide which one out of the 8 I want to hire, and I get a letter from you 2 days after the interview telling me you're not interested in the job, then that helps me out because now I can narrow that down to 7 people instead of 8. So, the trick behind writing this thank you letter is that you are going to say thank you without actually saying thank you. So we're going to show your appreciation in other ways, which is what the next couple slides are going to help you do as well. With regard to thank you letters, you still want to make sure that you're professional. That's going to be really important because remember, even though the interview is over with this thank you letter, it's still how you look in black and white on paper. So it needs to be professional. So if we flip to the next slide, the what it does slide, this thank you letter is going to show your professionalism. It takes a mature professional to say thank you or to realize how far a thank you goes. And it also takes a mature person who knows when they don't want a job and can admit it. And that's okay. So we talked about some of the other stuff on the what it does slide. It really does enhance your interest, but ultimately it gets your name in front of their face one last time because they saw your name on the cover letter and the resume, they were interested, they brought you in for an interview, and now you as the candidate are kind of hanging in limbo because you're not quite sure what's going to happen. So that thank you letter is one more chance for them to see that name and get used to who you are. And I've done this in the past too. I mean, when I worked as an office manager and I was doing the hiring and firing, or helping do the hiring and firing with the big dog boss, we would purposely wait when we had candidates that we liked and we couldn't decide. We would purposely wait before we would offer one of them the job because we would want to see who was actually going to take the extra time and effort and send us a thank you letter. And usually we offered the position to the person we got a letter from. If we didn't get a letter from either one of them, sometimes we would interview additional candidates. So it does really matter. So as far as the formatting goes, if you want to flip to the next slide with formatting, as far as the formatting goes, it's going to look exactly like the cover letter with regard to how it's set up. The content obviously is going to be a little bit different, but how it looks is going to be just like the cover letter. So it's going to be one page. You are absolutely typing this. You're doing 1-inch margins, which you should all be familiar with already, but if you're not, that's all right. Just let me know. We'll set you up. You want to pick a font that is easy to read. So just like as we talked about with your resumes and your cover letters, you don't want to pick any scripted font that looks like handwriting. You don't want to pick any font that looks silly like Comic Sans. You don't want to pick any of the fonts that are usually used for designing like Beaksmees or Goudy Stout or something like that. So the safe fonts for you to use are Times New Roman. That's always a staple. Calibri would be okay. C-A-L-I-B-R-I. You can also use Courier New and Arial are okay as well. Sometimes they're a bit wide, but that's okay. So those are kind of your safer fonts to use. When in doubt, use Times New Roman. It works for everything. With the thank you letter, just like with the cover letter, you are going to leave a spot so that you can sign your name at the bottom. You're going to put the recipient's address on top. Now, you are sending the thank you letter to the person or people with whom you interviewed. So, if you interviewed with, let's say when you applied for the job, you sent the cover letter into the human resources person, which is usually what happens. Human resources gets the applications, they weed through them, and then one of the bosses is the one who actually does the interviewing. So let's say that's what happened, and HR got your cover letter, but you actually interviewed with somebody else. In this case, you will not send the thank you letter back to the HR person because they didn't do anything. They didn't have any contact with you. So you're going to send the thank you letter to the other person you actually interviewed with. If you interviewed with more than one person, sometimes you might be in a panel interview. If that's the case, you have one of two options. You can either send a separate thank you letter to each person, or you can send one thank you letter that has all of their names on it on the same letter. You always, 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 in the interview process, you want to ask how to spell your interviewer's names, so this way you can get it spelled correctly on the thank you letter. If you don't remember that part, you can always call back and talk to the secretary or something like that on your way out and get the proper spellings, hoping that that person knows what they actually are. So, you're going to always, a thank you letter is typically 3 paragraphs, just like the cover letter is. If you're going to do a thank you letter that's refusing the job, it's probably going to be only 2 paragraphs instead of 3. You can go to a 4th paragraph if you choose. Usually it doesn't happen too often, but ultimately this whole thing is going to fit on 1 page. It's not going to be more than 1 page. So you're going to single space this whole thing. I know that through essays and different writings and things like that, you guys might be used to double spacing things. This one is just going to be single spaced, but you're going to actually leave an extra space between your paragraphs. So if you flip to the next slide of the who gets it, we kind of talked about this already. This is the one where you send the thank you letter to the person or people you actually interviewed with, and you can either send a separate letter to each person if it's multiple people, or you can send 1 letter with all of their names on it. Some places will have you do an interview and then call you back for a second interview, which happens quite a lot. We used to do that. We used to use second interviews if we didn't really get a good feel for the person the first time and we wanted to see how they were a second time. If we were down between a couple candidates and couldn't choose, we'd pull them back in. We've done performance second interviews where you actually come in and do something. But if that's the case, you have 2 options. If you leave the original interview and they're already setting up an appointment for the second interview, wait until the second interview is over and then send a thank you letter. If, let's say your first interview is over, you've mailed the first thank you letter, and then they call back and ask for a second interview, you can send another thank you letter after the second interview as well. You would just focus the second thank you letter on different stuff. But if that ever happens down the road, I know this is a lot of information, just because you might be graduating and you might be leaving, that doesn't mean that I go away. So if you run into that kind of a situation and you're not sure what to do, don't hesitate to reach out and contact us, and we can kind of give you some advice and help you through it, because you don't really know when you haven't done it before. So let's go to the next slide of what you talk about, because that's a weird thing with the thank you letter. Because remember, I said that you're going to show appreciation, you're going to show gratitude without actually saying thank you. So in this case, your thesaurus might help you out a lot if you look up the word thanks or whatever, and you can find other words like appreciation or gratitude or things like that. So here are the things that you want to talk about. When you leave an interview, you kind of have a feel for how it went. Because you can read their body language, you know the areas they focused on quite a lot. So you want to reflect that back to them in the thank you letter. So in the thank you letter, you want to focus on your strengths that they really liked. You want to focus on things you didn't get to talk about. So maybe you have some skills or you did community service, or there's something that you're really proud of that you didn't get an opportunity to talk about in the interview, you want to bring that up as well in the thank you letter. You can talk about your reactions to the office, to show excitement to work there, how friendly the staff is, how technologically advanced the office is, how organized, how friendly, crap like that. It's a little bit of sucking up, to be quite honest with that part. You want to incorporate some research that you've done on the place that is going to impress them. So maybe information that did not come up in the interview, but it's information you found out because you talked to previous patients, or you looked at their website, or things like that. Anything to show that you went the extra mile to learn about this place is going to make you look really, really good. Mainly you want to thank the interviewer for their time, but you really want to show interest and passion for this position. Now, this is with the understanding that you're writing the thank you letter because you want the job. If you don't want the job, we'll be talking about how to do that letter in a couple seconds. So, flip to the next slide. I kind of took this and broke those 3 paragraphs down for you and gave you examples. So the first paragraph is going to be short. So when I say paragraph, I'm using that word kind of loosely because you might only end up with 2 or 3 sentences in that first paragraph. It's going to be teeny tiny, kind of just like your cover letter was. So the first paragraph of a thank you letter has some guidelines, I guess you could say, of things that you want to make sure are in that first paragraph. So the first paragraph, you are going to show some kind of appreciation, obviously. The next thing that you want to do is remind the person who's receiving the letter of the exact day and time of your interview. I know that sounds a little stupid, like why wouldn't they remember? You have no idea how many people they've interviewed over a span of days, especially if you're applying in a bigger place like a hospital or a jail or a school or something like that, as opposed to a smaller private practice. So you want to specifically remind them of when you were there. Then you want to remind them of the position that you interviewed for. You can't, just like the cover letter, you can't just say, thanks for interviewing me for the job. Well, was that to clean the place? Was it to be a nurse? Was it to be a hygienist? Was it to be the doctor? Was it to be an MA? You need to remind them of what position you were actually interested in. And then you want another persuasive sentence at the end. So remember in our cover letter we talked about those selling sentences. You want another selling sentence at the end of your first paragraph in your thank you letter that you did not use in your cover letter. So when you first get used to doing these, if you want to put your cover letter next to you while you're writing this, that might help. Because remember that your employer, the person you interviewed with, they already have a copy of your cover letter. So if you send them a thank you letter that looks identical, they can hold the 2 documents next to each other, and that makes you look pretty bad. Like, come on. Were they too lazy they couldn't even think of something else that they do well, or were they so not creative or lazy that they just copied what they already wrote? So that's why you want to make sure that it's different. So here's an example. Flip to the next slide for me, please. You may totally steal my style for this first paragraph. So basically, if you want to steal my words, but just pull out and replace some of the things that actually apply to you, that's fine. You should be able to create your own selling sentence and not be able to take mine. So, the first sentence expresses thanks and reminds of the position that was applied for and tells them the day and time. So, I am writing to express my gratitude for allowing me the opportunity to interview for the full-time hygienist position on Thursday, November 12th at 2 p.m. So, you can take the full-time hygienist position and you can replace that with whatever you actually applied for. Part-time LPN, part-time medical assistant, full-time phlebotomist, whatever. And then notice I gave the specific day of the week, the date, and the time of the interview. Notice the year is missing because up at the top of the letter when you're formatting this, you're going to put the date that you're writing it, so you don't have to repeat the year again down in the body of the paragraph. So you don't have to worry about the year right there. So the final sentence is my selling sentence. I am confident my ability to work well with others and enthusiasm for my field will blend nicely with your courteous, friendly, and efficient staff. So, in my selling sentence, nowhere did I say I will make the place better, because that just makes me sound perfect and cocky and arrogant, and who wants to hire that person? But I was able to incorporate observations I made about the office, and I was able to incorporate a compliment about the office itself, and I was able to show some of my interest and passion for the field. So, that's your first paragraph. That's it. The selling sentence is going to be pretty important because that's going to lead you into your second paragraph. Now, just like the cover letter, the second paragraph is kind of that one's all up to you. I can give you the framework for the first and the last paragraph, but the middle paragraph, that's kind of all on you. So if you flip the slide, we'll talk about the second paragraph. This paragraph is where you're going to do all of the extras for this letter. So what I mean by that is this paragraph is where you're going to bring up stuff that you didn't talk about in the interview, things that you want to expand on, the things they liked about you. That's what happens in this paragraph. This paragraph kind of is an add-on to the interview, so to speak. So check out my partial example for you if you want to flip to the next slide. Pain and suffering's strict adherence to OSHA and HIPAA guidelines are in alignment with my own. My ability to multitask while providing quality care to my patients is mirrored in your satisfied patients and daily caseload. My training has greatly prepared me to provide thorough cleanings, education, and preventative measures during 45-minute appointments as you offer in your practice. So this particular middle paragraph is kind of geared towards a hygiene position. Notice a couple small details. I spelled HIPAA right. If at this point in your careers, in your medical careers, if you're spelling HIPAA the wrong way, I'm going to throw away your thank you letter and I'm not going to hire you just because of that. Because you should be spelling that right. You really need to know that legislation. I was able to bring in more of my skills while still talking about observations from the office. Like their caseload and my ability to multitask, their satisfied patients, and some of my own ethics. I also incorporated that I know how long one of their office visits is. So these are things that you can find out during interviewing or that you can research. If this paragraph gets too big, which sometimes might be rare, but if it does, just like with the cover letter, you can take this second paragraph and split it into two paragraphs if you need to. So that's where the possibility of it being a four paragraph thank you letter comes into play. But for the most part, that second paragraph is going to be pretty meaty. It's going to be bigger than the first and the third paragraphs are. But usually it never really goes past 4 paragraphs, or like 2 middle paragraphs, because then if it does, you're just rambling. So, let's look at the last paragraph for this thing. If you want to flip the slide to the third paragraph. Again, I can give you framework for this one. The third paragraph of your thank you letter is very similar to the last paragraph of your cover letter. So in this paragraph, you want to again, thank them for their time. You want to have a selling sentence. And you want to also mention some future contact. You just do it in a little bit of a different way. And this last paragraph is basically your last-ditch effort to finally sell yourself for this position. So check out my example on the next slide, please. And again, you can totally steal this and just manipulate what would apply to you. It was a pleasure to interview with you for the full-time dental hygienist position. Notice I repeated the position again. I sincerely appreciate your time, and I look forward to the opportunity to apply my extensive training and abilities to your illustrious practice. If you don't know what some of those words mean, that's okay. I just did some artful BSing, basically. But if you notice in the second sentence, it's only 2 sentences long, but in the second sentence, I incorporated speaking with them again, and I incorporated my selling sentence all together. But notice I don't ask them to speak with them again. I sound confident and say, I just look forward to working with you. Just like with the cover letter, there is no I hope, I feel, I think, I want, nothing like that. If you find yourself starting a sentence that way, that's fine. Just then go back and delete the I wish, I hope, I feel, I want, because you want it to sound more confident than that. So that's basically the structure of a thank you letter if you actually want to accept the job. But sometimes you run into where you actually know you do not want that job. You did not like the person you interviewed with. You didn't like the place as much as you thought you would. You got an offer from someplace else. But the thing is that you want to gracefully turn down the job without burning any bridges, because you really want to keep any contacts that you can possibly make. So, if you flip the PowerPoint to the next slide, we'll talk about how you could actually use the thank you letter to turn the job down. So like we said, you still want to actually send this thank you letter because people still took the time out to meet with you and interview you, and you can still show appreciation for their effort and their time. It's not necessarily their fault you don't want the job, so you can still be appreciative. So, you want to send the letter in the same time frame, and you want to follow all of the same kind of criteria as far as formatting and how you address it, sending it through the mail, dropping it off, yada, yada, yada. But it's going to be much smaller. So, flip to the next slide, please, if you're ready, where it says only paragraph. Typically, your refusal thank you letter is only going to be 1 paragraph long, because you don't really have much to say, but you need to gracefully turn down the job without insulting anybody. I always say that the older I'm getting, the smaller the world is getting, and it's a little scary. So people I went to high school with are now my students, or a patient I used to have was my teacher in my pre-Cana classes before I got married. It's just bizarre how you end up running into people again. So that's why you don't want to burn any bridges, because people who have worked in the healthcare industry for a long time have probably worked with each other, probably know each other, so you don't want to kind of put a blacklist on your name right from the get-go. So, here's what that paragraph is going to look like. You're going to open the letter the same exact way as you would if you were accepting the job. With the, I just want to show my appreciation for interviewing with me on such and such a day and time. But you want to let them know that you're refusing the job, but you would look forward to working with them again in the future. You do not have to necessarily tell them why you're turning down the job. Pulling reasons into it can back you into a corner and end up making you sound bad. There's really no nice way to say, hey, I hated your office. It was really disgusting, so I don't want to work there. Thank you very much. So just leave that out. Don't talk yourself into a hole. So if you want to flip to the next slide, I have an example for you. And this is the entire thank you letter right in this little slide. I am writing to express my gratitude for allowing me the opportunity to interview for the full-time hygienist position on Thursday, November 12th at 2 p.m. Again, that's identical to what you've already seen so far. Here's the turn it down part. While your staff was very friendly and efficient, it is with great regret I decline any further pursuit of this position. So, in that sentence, I have complimented the office, I've complimented the staff, and I tell them how sorry I am I have to turn down the job or any, further interviews or anything like that about the position. I don't say why. Even if I hated the place, even if the front office staff or whomever, if they were total jerks or mean or anything, I still want to craft that letter that way because it makes me look good. So, last sentence. I appreciate your time and consideration and would welcome the opportunity to work with you in the future. So, the reason why that is there is because what if the person you interviewed with moves on to another facility and you don't know, and you go to that new facility to interview and wham, there's that person. They're going to remember you from the first interview if you were horrible. So that's where the opportunity to work with them again comes into play. So that's your whole thank you letter if you're going to turn down a job. And again, you're more than welcome to steal my style of that and just fill in what works better for you, especially for a refusal letter, because they're kind of hard to write. So, flip to the next slide so I can tell you the things that this thank you letter has to be. And then we're done with this one. So the thank you letter has to be typed. Do not handwrite it. You look like a child if you do. Everything has to be typed, and it has to be concise and perfect. So by perfect, no spelling mistakes, no punctuation errors. It is super, super, super important that this thank you letter is perfect because it's you in black and white. If you spell your name wrong, if you spell the interviewer's name wrong, good luck, you're not getting that job. Concise. What that means is short, sweet, to the point. So you notice in that refusal thank you letter, I didn't say anything I didn't need to say. I got in, I got out, I got done. That was it. The thank you letter, again, is just going to be one page. It's going to be full of your skills and your abilities because you are selling yourself in this letter. And you want to keep bringing up how awesome you are from cover letter to interview to thank you letter. No slang at all. You want to make sure that you address this properly, which sounds weird, but you should know where punctuation goes in an address and things like that. And if everybody goes, yeah, of course I do. But then when we actually go over how to punctuate an address, it's kind of funny how sometimes people don't really know how you actually do it. So, that's how to put a thank you letter together. You're going to try it. Make sure when you're done writing one of these, you have someone look over it to help you. Because sometimes what you think sounds nice, someone else might take insulting, and that's the last thing you want to do with one of these letters. So, you're ready to write a thank you letter, I hope. Good luck!